Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Own Your Essence podcast, where we get to have deep transformational conversations with some of our favorite people. We are your host
Lee Walzak.
and April DeMille. And today we are looking forward to hearing a really empowering story from somebody that I met a few years ago, and I would consider her a friend. But I've also, on a professional level, worked with her uh, as a client. Like I've been able to participate in some of her cool quantum healing stuff. So I'm going to let Lee introduce her, and then we're going to bring her out and dive into some of her cool stuff.
Awesome. And I am new to this person, but I'm very excited to hear her story. We're excited today to introduce our guest, Amanda Quick. She is an international bestselling author, TEDx speaker, and trauma advocate who helps people transform shame into power. Through her work, Amanda guides others in reclaiming their stories, embracing radical accountability, and stepping into their fullest expression.
Yeah.
Sounds neat.
So we're going to bring her out. And just in the meantime, you guys, just so you know, we're doing all audio today because my computer hates me, apparently. So,
Technical problems.
yeah. So we're working around that. Hey, lady.
Hello.
Hi.
So Lee just had read out your introduction, and I was trying to explain to our listeners that I had the honor of meeting you a few years ago, and I actually got to sit in some of your some session time with you, and I am hoping we can talk about some of that as well at some point in this interview. But how did you get a start on quantum healing? Like, how did that come up for you?
Well, that's a that's a loaded question in
It
itself
totally is.
because because I don't think anybody enters the healing world
Just overnight.
just overnight. No,
Right.
usually, at least in my experience, it happens because something happened and you
Hmm.
go on a seeking journey. And so for me, the something that happened began in 2016, and the spiritual awakening that sent me on the healing journey didn't come till 2020.
Right.
And
Okay.
so I don't know how much where you want to take this exactly in that journey, but essentially it was a big catalytic event that
Right.
kind of opened my eyes to so much more is possible.
Yeah. And I know that that's where your book came in and things like
Yes.
that. So maybe we should just start there.
Okay. Well, I can give you the highlights. So in
Okay.
2016, I was a stay-at-home parent. My kids were 1, 4, and 5, almost 6. I had not worked for 5 years. My husband at the time worked, super long hours. I had like what I thought was a normal, happy life. And then one day, my then husband doesn't come home from work, and I eventually find him in jail, arrested for attempted human trafficking with a $250,000 bond. And so that began a snowball of all kinds of things in my life. And understanding and learning about who I was actually married to took years
So
because I think,
can I
go ahead.
ask you one quick question? Was there any inkling of evidence of any concerns before that profound moment just hit you?
No,
Yeah, God
no,
dang.
not that I at least could see.
Right.
Hindsight, I think you can see
Right.
more,
Yeah.
but the the version of me that made the phone call to the jail looking for my missing husband did not think that it was in the realm of possibilities.
Okay. Yeah,
And
fair
so it
enough.
was a shock. It was a, what did
Complete
you just
shock.
say?
Yeah. It was like, do you even have the right person? Like,
That
what?
exactly was the line of thinking I went down because
Yeah.
it was so far outside of the realm of even remote possibilities.
Yeah.
And so, my because it was such a shocking thing, I desperately tried to look for another explanation. The, level of cognitive dissonance that I was in meant that there had to be another explanation. And so it was my job to help him to fix it, to come to some sort of understanding because I also had 3 young children and I was running a lot of stories about my ability to take care of my kids by myself, to not take their father out of their lives, to all kinds of things, as that was my childhood.
And was he denying the allegations? Like, was he,
Yes.
yeah,
So his story, his version was that he solicited adults.
okay,
And this is something, a bomb that he dropped just very flippantly. Just has been happening since forever. No big
yeah,
deal. And so when they offered to purchase children, he thought, this they has to report it. And he had a whole story about what he was doing, meeting these undercover agents, which he did not know at the time were undercover agents,
right,
to
right.
purchase an 11 and 14-year-old.
Oh, that's right. I remembered about the 14-year-old. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And so his story was he was the victim because they wouldn't listen and they were accusing him of something he didn't do.
even though they had the evidential proof of the text messages and all the stuff
Right.
that,
But
yeah,
the thing is, families don't see the evidence. This is the thing
right,
people don't
right,
understand is when somebody's arrested, it's not like the cops are going to tell you all the details of what
right.
they have.
Yeah,
And and so all I had to go off of is what he said. And this
it's,
was,
yeah,
and I didn't know him to be a predatory person. And he was already admitting to cheating on me and very, very, of course, nonchalant about it. But I certainly wasn't even allowed to have feelings about that because we were facing a much bigger charge.
right. So you had to put your feelings aside and buckle down and like get into wife mode and how am I going to help my husband support the
Exactly.
family and do all the things and you were
Exactly.
still being gaslit as to the truth about any of the evidence anyway.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oof.
And I'm running on the version of me that knew how to survive in chaos.
Yeah.
And the version of me that had a very programmed identity of this is what I do, this is how I behave, this is what it's okay, and this is how I keep my world safe.
Yeah. Fair
And
enough.
I had this belief running that the only way I was going to be okay was if I made sure that my kids were okay. And the only way they were going to be okay is if they had both parents in their lives. Because again, I'm running the story since
Right.
my dad was not
Some,
in my life.
yeah, you've got some programming there that you've got to,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I was convinced that that was my duty and my obligation to make sure that their father stayed in their lives. And the only way that that was going to be successful is if we stayed together because with him, he was better than if I left. And so it's like I put,
Yeah, that's like what
yeah,
you thought. You thought that this is
correct.
where I end and this is his part and this is my part and
Yeah.
it
So I
it
made
yeah.
his crime my burden.
Okay.
I made what he did my responsibility to fix in some, at least to the best of my ability. And so the criminal proceedings take, in this case, about 9 months-ish. And what most people don't understand is most of these offenses actually get pled out. Rarely do they ever go through trial. And that at least if it stays in state court, because he never crossed state lines, it didn't go to federal court. Most of the time when they plead these out, they don't actually come with jail time. Most people are surprised by this. But in privileged white America, middle class men do not go to prison for trying to purchase children.
That's really
So
fucking
he
disturbing.
was offered a plea deal of 4 years of probation if he pled to attempted solicitation of a minor. So they usually drop the offense to a lesser felony. It was still a felony, but it was no longer the level, whatever, 1 or 2 that it was before, if he accepted the plea deal and went on probation. And then the other thing that this did is in the state of Colorado, where we were, there was a Supreme Court precedent set that sex offenders do not lose their right to parent. And so by pleading guilty, he actually regained unrestricted access to our children.
Jeez. Oof.
Yes, yes.
Oh my God. That's really gross.
It's definitely very gross. Every state's a little bit different, but most people, again, these are not things that people understand. And he had restrictions around other children as he was on sex offender probation, which is different than regular probation. But as far as his own children, the constitutional right to parent was intact.
I don't
And
understand that.
so
Like, how is there not an intersect there for safety? Like, I don't, that blows
I,
my mind.
I,
It just blows my
oh,
mind. I go,
honey,
what? Like,
it
that's a
is,
whole nother episode, but like,
it's a
what?
whole, I mean, the reality of the world we live in that people have no idea when it comes to what actually goes on in these particular areas. And I mean, me and my children were never questioned. The house was never searched. I was afraid that that was going to happen at the time, but
Right.
in retrospect, I don't even know what they would have found on his computers, for instance. And none of that was part of it. It was almost like their goal was to catch him and put him through treatment because they believe that they can rehabilitate them through the sex offender treatment program.
And so that's what he was doing on probation, this 4 years or
Correct.
whatever. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a treatment program that they get put through where they're in like weekly group therapy, essentially.
So I
Or,
feel like I know someone that went through something like that as a sex offender, and or I heard about it anyway,
yeah,
long story, but I feel like I remember there was being even in his stories, there were like a lot of gaps as how they got away with
yes,
so much stuff. And I was like really sickened to hear that because the person telling me this was kind of glowing about it. Like I get to get
yeah,
away with all this stuff. And I was like,
yeah.
that's really fucking gross.
It's really gross. And the people even running the programs are they really honestly don't know what they're dealing with, let alone, the
No.
amount of ego at play in a lot of these situations. And
Yeah. And a lot of those based on the person that told me the story, he was already well aware of what to say to get through the
yes,
program just
yes,
to get out of it. And I was like,
yes,
duh, God, these are so ineffective and just putting these
yes,
people right back out there to
yes.
do more harm.
And my children's father was brilliant. He was truly very intellectually
Well, they'd have to
ad-
be. If he'd been living this lie all this time so
yes,
well that you didn't even know about it, he'd have to be fucking a master manipulator and very experienced at
yes.
this.
And truthfully, he admitted at some point, and he never got to the point of admitting the specifics of what he was truly doing. Like I never got all of that out of him,
Never? Like
but
you've never heard all of it.
the closest I got was I maybe might have gone through with it. Maybe. That's the closest I got.
Okay.
But
So
he
still no admission.
absolutely, no, he absolutely said that part of the thrill and the arousal was around knowing how much he could get away with.
Yeah,
And so
right.
the same is true when they
That
go through
sounds
treatment
true.
programs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, that
I
sounds
know the
exactly
game to
like
play.
that sounds
Yep.
about like what I heard from this other person. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That I know how much can I push the boundaries, how much I get away with.
Yeah.
That it's actually where so much of the thrill is.
Yeah.
And so, regular solicitation isn't thrilling enough.
Right.
And so they have to push the boundaries even more. And what else can we do?
Which
And
is
what
kind
other
of like what
stories?
addiction's about anyway.
Uh-huh.
Like
Yep. Yep.
that's really what it's
Exactly.
about. So, ugh.
Exactly. And it becomes obsessive and compulsive and all of the things. And so, anyway, the story continues as he moves back into the home. I'm trying to convince myself this is a good thing and put my marriage back together. And I eventually realize I have to go back to work. His mental health is actually deteriorating. What is visibly had been depression, anxiety is getting worse. He can't focus, he can't concentrate. The reality is when you start to get exposed, when you've been in that, it starts to take a bigger toll in a visible way in your mental health. And I had been reliant on him for financial support. And so I kind of go, okay, I'm not going to make as much money as he did, but I have to start somewhere because I can sort of see where this train is going. And I went back to work in 2017, making 50% of what he had made previously. But I knew that that was the next step. And the other thing that happened, going back to work did for me is the period of time where he was on bond and then when he first moved back into the house, he had been on the phone with me nearly 24/7. It was almost like to stay connected, we had formed a really deep trauma bond
Okay.
because I couldn't talk to anybody else. I couldn't tell them what was going on. I was completely isolated. The only
Mhm.
person who could understand was him. And I had this belief it was my job to keep the family together, to keep him connected. And so he was in my ear at all times. I couldn't have a thought without him being there. And even if I had emotions or got upset about what he did even admit to, I wasn't allowed to feel those feelings. He would show up with flowers and letters and apologies and all the love bombing things.
Anything to keep you hooked,
Uh-huh.
girl. Anything to
Anything to
keep
keep me
you
tied
hooked.
in, anything to
Yeah.
keep me from feeling or seeing or anything.
Yeah.
And so when I went back to work, it was not in my ear all of a sudden for 8 or 9 hours a day.
Oh, how nice.
And it was, to be honest, weird and uncomfortable at first
Yeah.
because my thoughts were my own all of a sudden.
You're like, oh my God,
And
I have time to myself while I'm working. So I'm not sure how much time that is to myself, but it was something.
but it was still starkly different. And so, I'm kind of rediscovering these parts of me. I used to enjoy working. I wasn't just a mom anymore. It wasn't just my job to take care of the house. And I made friends, but I was very careful not to talk about anything going on at home. I had kept my worlds very separate, very divided. They weren't allowed to touch. And eventually that became challenging. Another, 6 to 9 months or so into that job. And, we've got the company Christmas party and you're supposed to bring your spouse. And I'm, nope, nope, don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Total panics.
Yeah.
And I start to realize that my two worlds cannot mix and I don't want them to.
Right.
And so which one's really the problem? Because for so long I had kept this protective bubble around my house and my family, and that was supposed to be my safe place, and it no longer felt that way. And yet I was carrying all of this guilt because I couldn't do that to my kids. I couldn't rip their lives apart. I had just fought to keep it together because my story in my head is I'm going to be doing this to them if I do something.
Yeah, like it was all your fault when it
It's all on
wasn't.
me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you
And
start
so
having health issues because you were living
I didn't have health issues, but I started drinking. That was the
Okay.
next thing I did.
Okay.
I felt like I was supposed to be the affectionate, loving wife, and I could now hardly look at my husband anymore.
Okay.
So I would come home and have half a bottle of wine, and then I could be affectionate.
Right.
That was my,
Yep.
I could turn my feelings off.
That was your coping.
That was my coping mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the feelings that I had been suppressing were starting to bubble up, whether I liked it or not. And I didn't want to look at him. So out comes the wine.
Right.
It felt like there were ghosts in the room. It felt like every time he looked at me and wanted to initiate anything with me, the thoughts in my head were, that's what you did with them. That's what you looked, how you looked at them. And it just,
Yeah.
he couldn't do anything without me feeling like he was surrounded by all of this energy. And I'm looking at your face and you're just like, oh, yeah.
It's rough because, and I make the faces because I've been there and I
Yeah.
know this story. I've been in it. So
Yeah.
in
And
different
so
ways. Yeah.
I'm trying to numb, I'm trying to pretend, I'm trying to figure out how to deal with my life.
Yeah.
And I find myself also being attracted to a coworker because
Okay.
he doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't carry the ghosts anymore, and he's
Yeah.
nice and doesn't have this story, and he's also at work, which
And
is
you're
my
being
safe
seen
place.
for someone
Yeah,
different.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And we've built a friendship, and he's one of the
Yeah.
first people I tell at work about what's going on. And instead of looking at me with pity, he looks at me with awe, actually. And it's like, you're going through all of that and you're kicking butt at work. He saw me in a different way. And so I started having fantasies and I started making stories in my head, and I realized I know what it's like to be cheated on. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
So instead, I'm going to come clean. I'm going to say I'm really not okay because this train is happening and it feels like I'm not in control anymore.
Like you can't stop where it's going at this
Totally
point.
cannot.
Yeah.
So might as well stop fighting.
Yeah.
And so I tell my husband, and at first he tries to talk me out of it, but really quickly he switches gears and says, "Okay, you go do what you need to do.
Oh.
I'll stay in the house. We'll be weird normal. You go date." And of course he's pulling
So,
at all of
right.
I don't want to break the kids up. I don't want to move,
Mhm.
none of that. And at the same time, he's keeping the control he has. He's staying in the house. He's, building his story here because he's actually telling me to go leave in a sense.
Yeah.
And as that relationship did begin, and it was another piece of healing for me because I got to learn Amanda likes to have fun and be joyful, and all of these pieces of me that I had kind of lost over the years got to come out again. And I got to find not just the pieces of me that were smart and could do work, but they could go and dance and go on bike rides and all of those things that come with dating and all of that. And
Well, you get to look at yourself through different lenses and reinvent
yes,
yourself, right? Like
exactly.
You're literally
Exactly.
creating a new version of you.
Exactly. And so all of that was wonderful and weird at the same time because I'm living with my husband. I'm dating my
Because it's
coworker.
like what, like polyamorous type
Except I was no longer
story?
sleeping with my husband. He'd moved
Right,
out,
right.
but we had the family together and the kids together.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely weird. It was definitely confusing. And after a few months, I actually got a promotion at work and was now going to be my boyfriend's boss. So I decided, okay, that's too much. Can't do that. And I break up with him because I also realized I need to like deal with my life. This was fun, but this isn't working. This is getting weird, and I need to deal with my life. And my husband takes that at we're gonna get back together. Except the other realization that's starting to happen is I start to see more of the manipulations for what it is. My
Okay.
children's behavior had started to change. They started seeing things about me leaving, about me moving on and having a baby and leaving them. Like they don't come up with stuff like that on their own, especially my youngest was 3 at the time.
Yeah, so that's not a legitimate fear for someone that
No.
can't even,
I
yeah,
mean, he was still nursing and he's
right.
asking if I'm going to leave them for another baby.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's
So the
this.
seeds are being
Yeah,
planted.
the seeds are being planted and I see it for what it is. And I'm annoyed and I'm frustrated, but in my head, he's just an asshole. Like that's what I think. And that's my problem. That's not their problem. Because again, I still kind of refuse to believe that there's more here, but I don't like any of it.
Right.
And when I say we're not getting back together, he goes on the offensive and he files for divorce, including a motion to kick me out of the house, claiming
Oh,
he's the primary parent.
okay. Sorry. Like
Um,
the level of
yes, the audacity of
crazy.
some people
Yeah,
here.
like I'm just
Uh-huh.
like, oh, okay.
And I'm
Whatever.
I'm furious. I'm probably more upset about this than anything else because
Okay.
I'm trying to keep the family together and it
Yeah.
doesn't work. He doesn't kick me out, but he actually gets ordered to move. And we have a temporary orders where the kids have to go back and forth, but it's clearly going to be a fight. The divorce is going to be a fight because again, he has his full constitutional right to parent. It appears that all of his prior history is irrelevant in the family court.
Which
People
that's
are shocked by
still,
it.
yeah, I'm still
They're
just
shocked by
blown
this,
by
but
that.
unless I could prove that my children were in danger, his prior history was irrelevant. And it wasn't quite that simple. Anybody who's ever gone to court to fight for custody knows even in normal circumstances, it can be a really challenging thing. And so we proceed down what ends up being an 18-month long custody fight. And we are able to settle finances out of court, but nobody can agree on what to do with the kids because nothing feels right. This is the point where I'm starting to realize there's more going on. My body feels it. I can't even put words to it. I can't even describe it because it just feels horrible. And so when he says I only accept 50-50 and I'm like, no, that's not okay, you're not even allowed to say you want full custody. Like that gets seen as you're causing problems and you're trying to not have a relationship with the other parent. And yet anything felt bad. And
Right.
so we end up hiring about a third party to make a recommendation to the court, who does full psychological evaluations on everybody. He gets diagnosed with some personality disorders. I was pleasantly surprised to find I was psychologically normal. I think at that point you wonder.
Woohoo! Yeah.
You
Well,
wonder, just
it's true that you do wonder when you're the victim in any abusive scenario. A lot of
you
times
feel
those
like the crazy
victims,
one.
yeah, they
You really
really
do.
do. That's what gaslighting and all those
Yep.
tactics are. They're designed to do that to
Yep.
you.
He used to tell me that I was a narcissist and he was an empath and that I
Yeah.
was I was the
Yeah.
cause of all of
Girl,
this.
I've heard it all too. It's
And I remember
insane.
calling my mom and be like, Mom, am I a narcissist? And she said, Honey, no narcissist ever stops to ask themselves that. I
Right.
promise.
Yeah. So,
Um, and so, the kids going back and forth, their behavior starts to get worse. It gets violent, it gets physical with me because I'm the only one holding boundaries. He's feeding them sugar and all the things. And so they like almost go through withdrawal at my house and they go back over there. It's a lot. And at the same time, I'm trying to hold it together. I've got work, I've got all the things. And what I'm starting to see in the kids is their behavior getting to the point where I'm having these almost these words, later as I understand more of my call them psychic gifts perspective. I'm much more claircognizant. And so things come as just this knowing, and my
Yeah. The
body feels
feeling.
it.
Yeah. You feel it in
My
your gut and
body
you just
feels it
know.
and I know it.
Yeah.
And my body was screaming at me. And the words that kept coming through were grooming. And I go, oh, dear. And I will spare you all of the details of what my kids said, but there was more and more times where my middle son specifically told me things that I went, what the hell did you just say? Except you can't have a response or reaction.
Right.
And you can't file reports in a high conflict divorce.
Right.
And so I really had to be strategic to try to figure out how I could approach this. And everything in me is like, pack up my kids and leave, but you
Yeah.
can't
Because
do.
all you want to do as a mama bear is
Yeah,
save your fucking babies.
exactly. And so this is the point where my rock bottom is not his arrest, not any of the rest of it, but seeing the writing on the wall, the timelines in play, that I was going to end up sharing custody with a man who was grooming and would likely end up doing more with his own children. And there
Right.
wasn't anything I could do because of the way the court system was set up.
Yeah.
Because until I could prove something, the trouble with the family court is until something bad
Actually
enough
happens.
happens,
Yeah.
um, then the until something happens, you then have to prove it,
Right.
right? And so they're not protective; it's punitive only.
Yeah.
Um, and so the that was my big issue is like I'm not going to wait till they're actually being abused. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
But that's the way the system works. And so this is the point in where the universe intervenes. This is the point where I really don't feel like there's anything I can do, and yet I still didn't know what I didn't know. And it was my counselor, my mental health. I was in therapy. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I was trying EMDR. I was trying to calm my nervous system because I was having panic attacks at this point.
Yeah.
Says, have you ever thought about seeing a psychic? Like, what? You want me to see a fortune teller?
You're like,
Like,
how is that going to help? Yeah.
how is this gonna help?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to, and so I go and I see this woman because I'm like, fine, whatever.
At that point, you're probably like, I'll just try anything. I don't give a
I'll,
shit.
whatever. Yeah, nobody else can help. I'll go
Yeah.
see your lady. And I was raised very spiritual. My mom is very spiritual, but I didn't subscribe to it. It was another push away from her. And truthfully, the spirituality, my mom was very love and light, and I knew there was much more
Then
colors
that.
and
Yeah.
spectrums than that.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it honestly felt like her spirituality was a rejection of me because
Okay.
it was so light focused, and I was more than that.
Yeah.
And and so I wasn't
Because
totally
toxic
unaware.
positivity is totally a
Yes.
thing.
It is. It
It
is. And
absolutely
it
is.
felt like a bunch of bypassing and
Yeah.
all of that. And I knew that much even as a teenager, but I also stayed agnostic and there was something. I just didn't know what the something was. And so I went to see this woman, somewhat aware, but still kind of not exactly sure. And she describes her gifts where she sees angels like they're people and the way
Yeah.
she senses energy. And she says, your angels are just jumping up and down. They're so ready to help you. I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm listening.
Yeah.
And she starts telling me the story about a past life of mine. And she said, this is the loudest karmic echo that I have seen in a very long time. And she's telling me a story about 500 years ago in the south of France, where me and this same man, and she even said his name was Jean Charles, and his name in real life was Charlie. So it was
Yeah.
like all of the things. And
Lined
that he
up.
was physical and a drunk, but so the specific addictions in a sense were different, but the energy underneath was the same. And
Okay.
things were okay until the kids came. And then the kids came and I stepped in front to protect them. And I had all of these reasons why I couldn't leave. And she starts like telling me the things going on in my head. And it's literally things that were going on in my head for the last 4 years. I'm like, all right, I'm listening. And then she says, in this life, he ends up beating me to death and throwing me down the stairs in front of the children. And she's like, I'm watching the scene play out, and my whole body starts vibrating. And I start to feel this like panic fear come up. And she says, that fear that you're feeling right now, you need to get a hold of that fear. Like,
Yeah.
this is not this lifetime fear. And I was deathly afraid of him. He never laid a hand on me, but
No,
he
but
had
there
that
was
all
that
of
cell
the,
memory still
yeah,
there.
and that
Yeah.
stalking behavior and that manipulation behavior. I was
Yeah.
terrified of him.
Yeah.
And so she's telling me you have to get a hold of that fear because you're not living in that time. You can own property, you can make decisions, you can do all of that.
Yeah.
And she said, the reason you're sitting down in this chair here today, the reason your angels created this session is because you haven't made a choice. And what do you mean? Like, I've hired the people, I've done the things.
You're like, I'm going
She
through the
said,
actions, the divorce has happened, like all the things.
yeah.
Like,
She says, you haven't made a choice. And for whatever reason, I saw myself clearly than the way that she said it and everything that had happened. And she wasn't wrong. There was a part of me that
right,
still
because
didn't want,
even limbo is kind
yes,
of a choice.
it is. It
Yeah.
is. And by still wanting to believe there was still another explanation because I didn't want to be in the situation at all.
Right.
I wanted I wanted my family back. I still wanted my fucking marriage at the time, but I was deeply ashamed to admit it even to myself.
Well, and you were already, if I recall, please correct me if I'm wrong, you were getting some lashback too because you decided to work on your marriage, right?
I at that point I was already separated, and so we
Right.
were already going through all of it. But in the
Oh, okay.
beginning, yes.
But yeah,
In the
okay.
beginning, I certainly was, and that's what kept me isolated. And so
Right.
I had gone through all of the steps, but energetically, I had not chosen. I
Right.
was still making excuses. I was still engaging. I was still trying to think that my presence could help, could heal, all of the things.
Yeah.
And
You were
she
still trying to be the
said,
savior.
I was
Yeah.
for all of those same reasons. And she said, the reason you're here is you haven't chosen, and your angels can't help you if you haven't chosen. And I'm like, all right, I'm done. She's like, you gotta mean it. It's like, fine. And I stand up and I'm done.
Yeah.
And it something that moment was more than just a
Did you feel the like the
statement.
pop in your body? Like was
It
there
was a
a
profound like shift in timeline and energy and everything
yeah.
because that me saying I'm done, it meant I was done choosing to try to help him in any lifetime whatsoever. I was done with him completely
Yeah.
in this life and any other. I was done putting any energy into anything that he said or did. My only
Yeah.
focus was me and my kids
Right. So you
and
had
getting
decided
out of
at
the
that point to kind
situation.
of like cut the cord
I was
and
done.
cut your
Yes,
losses, and that
everything.
was it. You're
And this
shutting
is
down
before,
all the trajectories.
yes, this is before I knew about quantum healing. This is before I knew about timelines and chords or any of it. But
Okay.
I did it, I literally did it in a moment
Yeah.
because this is what I needed to do. And I kid you not, 6 weeks later, my entire world was different.
Right. So let's get into
Six
that because
weeks.
at some point, he, like now, years later, he's completely decided not to even be any
Correct.
part of the kids. Like he's completely vanished.
6 weeks later was my final divorce hearing. I had to face him in court, and those 6 weeks I collected more evidence than the entire years prior. I had all of the things, and I said my piece, and I faced him, and the judge heard me. My ask to the universe was that the judge would see clearly, not that she would choose my side, but that she would see clearly
Right.
and do it, and my kids and I would be safe. And that's exactly what happened. She did give him one opportunity to put all the protections in place and get the therapies, and he didn't do any of it. He wasn't capable and he wasn't willing.
Mhm.
And so at the end of the day, he was only allowed supervised visitation, which he never exercised. And so April of 2020, almost now 5 years ago, was the last contact that any of us have had.
Yeah.
It was just over,
Just like that.
just like that. And so you asked me, the question was what sent me on a quantum healing journey? All of a sudden, my world was wide open to holy crap,
Everything. Yeah.
there is so
Yeah.
much more.
Yeah.
I don't know what I did, but if people can talk to angels, I got to figure out how to do that. I know somebody who believed that oh, only special people can do this. If they can do it, so can I. I just need to
Right.
figure out how. I just need to be open to what that means and what that looks like. And I deeply wanted to understand the levels of trauma in the body and
Yeah.
the ways all of these things were connected, both to heal myself so that I wasn't going to repeat those patterns, but also knowing that I had 3 children and wanting to ensure that I understood what what we were passing down and how we were moving forward in our lives. Because
Yeah.
my story isn't unique. I mean, the specifics sure are, but even my mom's journey with my father was energetically very similar, even down to the custody fight and him disappearing and stepping out of our lives. And so it was clear it was a pattern that I needed to break, and I did. But then I wanted to learn so much more. And it was also
Yeah, because
COVID.
everybody needs to learn how
Yes,
to break these
yes,
ancestral wirings, like it doesn't
exactly.
have to happen.
Exactly. And we were graced with COVID 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized and everything shut down. And it was a beautiful time of healing for me and the kids because we were no longer affected by the outside world, actually. And so it was a time to come together. Everybody was home. And I jumped into literally everything I could find. And there was a lot in that time about quantum healing, about channeling, about angels, about aliens, about all of
Well, and
it.
you got into codes. What was it?
Decodes. Yeah.
Thank you, because that was the first time that I'd heard about you through my
Yes.
best friend Kelly. So
Yes.
she had met you, and I
Yeah,
think
so there's
y'all,
all the online communities
yeah,
about through healing. And so
yeah,
I started meeting people who had different beliefs and knew how to do different things. And
yeah.
while I don't practice the same modalities that I learned in the same way, it really opened up my what is possible belief. It opened up my understanding of how energy works in the body. It opened up this understanding of what I did and how I operate my life now today differently.
Well, and unlayering the shame, because I know that
Yes.
I've even come and sat with you in some of your sessions and
Yeah.
had amazing results sitting through some of that time with you.
Yeah, and shame is a big one that has is really you could talk about it as one of the biggest things in the collective that
Yeah,
keeps so much trauma suppressed.
yeah,
And one of the things that I do differently than a lot of people is I actually believe our shame is our biggest gift. And
yeah.
it's part of why I then wrote my book. It's why I gave my TED Talk. It's why I've put out this very
It's
big
putting
shameful
the
story.
spotlight on those shadows because that's
Yes.
really where our magic is. And I
Yes.
totally believe that.
Yes, exactly. And so I've flipped the script on shame in a different way,
Yeah.
but I do so as an invitation, as an alchemization, as this understanding of look at all of this experience I've gathered with all of these crazy archetypes of pain and trauma and everything else.
Yeah.
And how do we actually move through this differently? And how do we choose to use it in a way that supports ourselves and
Yeah,
others?
and I even is there a way to approach it with enthusiasm ever?
Yes,
Like can we ever
yes.
even get excited about it?
I mean, today I'm excited by oh, I am triggered as holy crap, there is something here
That
and I'm
mean yeah,
uncomfortable in the moment, but I know there's
exactly.
something good.
Right. Which means something good's going to come out of this.
Something is going to be good. It's there. But
Yeah.
truthfully, the ability to hold deep shame and guilt and all of the yucky stuff, when people come to me, they know they can literally tell me anything. I can hold more darkness without judgment, without my own feelings, because I've walked through all of it. And I don't go, oh, you're a bad person at
Well, and
all.
I think I think there's some healers out there like that because that resonates for me too. I think there are some magical people that really know. I feel like Melissa Corder's like this too, but like, and we'll talk about her another time, but like there are magical people that know that walking through that darkness is where
Yeah.
all your magic's going to be. Like
Yes.
it's where all the healing's going to be. It's where it's just that's why we intuitively just know toxic positivity that's like not for us. Like
Right.
it's not, there's so much going on that still has to be said.
Exactly. And all the stuff that kept me away from the spiritual communities, all the stuff that kept
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
and closed off, I realized I didn't have to be closed off because I had more to experience and more to share about how important it is for us to embrace those other dimensions of ourselves and the
I know that when
experiences.
my daughter died, I went through something very similar because everybody was around me, in that positive mindset.
Hmm.
Everything has to be fairies and rainbows and all the things. I'm like, shut the fuck up with that shit. I don't, like I knew that there was a process I had to go through, even if I
Yes.
didn't have the verbiage for it, even if I
Yeah.
didn't have the understanding of it. I knew I had to do these things, and all of those people were making it worse, not
Yes,
better.
exactly. Exactly. And so today I'm honored to be able to hold space for people in those big, dark seemingly horrific places because I know the value they have too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can hold them in that in a different way. And I know the value of speaking out and telling your story and the healing that comes from writing. I know the value of speaking it out. And it is really my goal to model that in a different way for people going forward.
Yeah. So, and I can absolutely give you props for the sometimes people just have the messages and the keys for us.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you had come into my life or us into each other's life at just the right time because I had been going through something that I had committed to for 5 years.
Hmm.
And it was wrapped up in some shame around sexuality. And I remember going through a program with you, and I got so much out of that program. It really spoke to me for sure. But when I did at the end of the program, we did a session together.
Hmm.
And without giving too much detail about that session, within hours of that session, something shifted and action started taking place right away.
Yeah.
And in, I would say, I would say within about 3 months of that time frame, massive, bigger shifts were happening. And it was linked to my abundance and all the
Hmm.
things, right? And it was really impressive how I was able to manifest you to help me make that move because
Yeah.
I knew I needed to make the move
Yeah.
and I knew I needed help to make the move. And you just
Yeah.
happened to be the one that had the keys for that moment. And
Yeah.
so it was really fucking impressive. And so I that's my review for you.
Well,
Like
I thank you
that's
very
my
much.
review is like how yeah, it's definitely having an experience or a moment to work with you is
Yeah.
absolutely worth it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It is truly an honor to be able to do that and to use now what, seemed like this horrible, horrible thing in a way that is supportive for people and seeing them in different ways. And not all sessions, are these hugely profound things because everybody has to be ready
Yeah.
and the right pieces have to click in place. But I definitely feel like I am here to be that catalyst and that activator for people and be really anchored in their truth and their experiences. And yeah, I will never tell somebody their experience is valid or wrong. And I never want somebody to come and, what does your pendulum say or what do you see? I really want to push it back and reflect. What's your truth?
Yeah.
Where are you at? Because that's what we need to dig into, not and I can share my perspective as I'm seeing it, but what's truest for you is the most important thing that we have to hold.
Right. And that's where you're as a guide, you're saying you have all the power. Let's look at
Yes.
that. Not
Yes. I
not relying on
never
me for the power.
correct. And that's truly where I've honestly struggled in some cases is I refuse to allow people to put me on a pedestal or say I know more, anything of the sort. I trust my knowings. I trust my body in a different way because it has shown me that I was right all along.
Right.
And I just now I'm actually listening. But my goal is to actually to get you to listen to you and
Yeah.
what you need and where you're at. And so it's really the, sessions together or classes. So it's a co-creation where you bring your pieces and together we kind of unravel what is coming forward.
Okay. Yeah. I love that. Lee, I know that you've been absorbing the story, but this is your moment, I think, to ask Amanda any questions that you have.
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, Amanda, for sharing everything. I don't know that I have any questions, honestly, that we would have time for, but I will say that I appreciate all of that, and I think it's a fascinating journey from obviously a series of, traumatic, highly traumatic events into alchemizing that into, um, working with people in a way that is beneficial for them. And I think I think the last bit of what you just said, leading people back to themselves, is really the mark of a true healer. So I
Yeah.
can definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
that we can relate to that story for sure. So, yeah. So, Amanda, do you have Is there anything that you have in the works, things coming up that you're able to share? I know you've got your book out there.
Yeah,
Um,
so I have my book. It's called The Sex Trafficker's Wife. It goes
okay,
through all of the gory details.
okay,
I also have a TED Talk that's called The Healing Power of Storytelling. That's the same story, but with a TED appropriate
right.
version. And right this moment, I also have my own podcast called Awakened Motherhood. So I help share other people's stories. My story is not the only big story out there. I really want to give voice to so many people's experience. I want them to know how powerful their journey is and how many connections there are. And there is a way to work with me on my website, but I truly am focusing on a different version of presence right now and finding joy in a different way and less about specific business building. And so while I'm always open for collaborations, I am really, really focusing right this moment on what lights me up and how do I want to create in a way that feels fun. And I have ideas about apps I want to build. I have other books I want to write. And
This
so I
fucking
always
genius over here. I love her brain.
And so I really have so much going on, but there's this really big change happening in the world right now.
Mhm.
And I'm really kind of in a bit of a pause as I reflect on how I want to work with this energy going forward,
Okay.
because I don't want to do things because that's how we've always done them. It's this amazing opportunity right now to see the division in the world as for what it is and to not sit in the division and
Yeah.
to instead create from a different place. And so that's really where I am today. But people can certainly contact me through my website. I am on social media. I always welcome connections and collaborations as well.
Okay. Well, lady, I love you to death. You're one of my faves. And I'm really glad that we got to have you here today. I'm a little pissed that I'm can't figure out what's wrong with this Zoom thing and why we don't have you on video, but we will have to figure that out so that doesn't happen again. So I don't know if that's a technical defect from me or Mercury or both or whatever, but yeah, that is not fun. So I would have rather had your face on here.
Yeah, well, it's all good. My face is in a lot of places, so
That's true. I mean, it's like the only people that are going to really miss out are on YouTube because it's
yeah,
going to be on the podcast anyway. But still, it's nice to see your face. But I can see
yes.
your face anyway. So, so there's that. But I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording. Lee, do you have anything that you want to add before we?
No, just thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye, you guys. We'll see you next time.